Welcome to this live stream. I was just figuring out I was talking to mute. Happy New Year. Well, I hope you had, I would say, a really pleasant time with your family, and welcome back to this channel. Thanks for tuning in. So in this, let's say, live stream, we're gonna look at the Autopilot, right? This is the second part of the Autopilot videos, which I'm recording, or which I'm streaming. And initially I had a plan to do it with the Cessna 152. But unfortunately, the Cessna 152 doesn't have an autopilot functionality in Flight Simulator 2024. I checked it in Flight Simulator 2020 and there it has one, but it looked like that they removed it. However, you've got the capabilities, the limited capabilities in the Cessna 172, so without the G1000. However, to start with, I thought it would be nice to start with a little bit more complex one, which is the one from the Beechcraft King Air C90 GTX. So I hope that's okay with everyone. Again, welcome to this channel. Let's get started. So what I did is I created a flight plan, right? Let me load the flight plan. Load it from this PC, right? So Rotterdam Eindhoven. And you can see that I added, I would say, a departure from runway 24. I didn't add a specific departure because it simply is straight out. And then I'm going to go directly to an approach. And that approach is to this airport, right, to runway 21. So if I show it, right, if I fire it with the ATC, you can see that this happens, right? So this happens. So it looks okay-ish. However, we might want to change it. So let's have a look how we can do that. So we can click on change procedure. And there we have, I would say, a lot of transitions which we could select from, and based on this you can, for example, select the GZR and then press change and then hit file plan with the ATC again, and then you will see it changes it to this, right? Might not make complete sense, but for this video I think it's perfectly fine. The other thing which you need to keep in mind if you're filing the flight plan, or say, is that you set the cruise altitude. What I figured out is when, for example, creating a file plan with SimBrief and then loading it here, that it doesn't set the altitude correct, which results in that the ATC assigns you a really weird altitude, which is 1000 feet. And for these aircrafts, it might make sense. But hey, if you're flying with, for example, a Boeing 737, it does not make sense at all. So the second thing is we're going to send the route to the avionics, right? That avoids us from having everything to push it in manually into the flight system, in the avionics. And then we're going to press start flight. So if you're curious about how to manually add the flight plan to this aircraft, keep an eye on my channel because I'm really planning to do a video around that part of the simulator. I already created one for the Cessna 172, but keep an eye on my channel because there's more to come. Besides that, I'm seeing already a lot of people joining, right? So cool. Thank you for joining this one. I hope you had a nice time with your family. And if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the live chat. So we're going to press ready to fly because that's what we're going to do. So the first thing which I'm going to do is I'm not going to enable the autopilot, but I'm going to quickly show it to you, which I should, of course, have done, I would say, on the parking spot. And that's, I would say, all these nice systems, right? These are the systems which are, I'd say, responsible for the autopilot. And this is the most important one, that's the engage the autopilot. And that's the one we're going to use first. And then we will look at the other ones later on. So let me remove the parking brake in this case and then increase the throttle. And then hopefully everything is going correct. So here we go. You can see that the flight plan is already, I would say, planned, right? Because you can see it in the systems over here. But let me also keep an eye on the runway, right? That's, of course, the most important thing. And then let's see if we can get airborne. So here we go. We're making nice speed. You can see it's a pretty, I would say, not that busy at the airport, right? But it's still pretty nice. So here we go. So we're going to go airborne. Not a too steep climb, right? Just, I would say, a small one, but that's okay. So, gear up. Whoa! Reset the view. And as mentioned already, right, let's activate the autopilot. So we're going to do that, right? Normally you would do it above 400 feet. Well, we're just arrived above 400 feet, so we're going to activate it. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the climb altitude. However, what you currently see is that the autopilot already works, right? It has the roll mode and it has the pitch mode. So the pitch mode simply makes sure that we're climbing, or we continue to climb a certain pitch. And the roll mode simply makes sure that we're flying into the direction which we're going to. Now we're flying straight, which means that we continue to fly straight. But if you would, I would say, fly in, I would say, for example, I would turn to the left, it will continue to turn left. But that's enough for now, right? Let's first, I would say, make sure that we're setting the altitude correctly, and we can use that or do that using this, I would say, small knob over here, and you can simply turn it around. And if you turn it around, you will see a few things happening. I will zoom in onto that display a little bit closer in a few seconds. So the other thing which you need to keep in mind is that if you turn slowly, it will increase with 100 feet per minute. Or 100 feet, but if you scroll really fast, it will go with thousands of feet, and then you'll see that it currently has been set to 5,000 feet, and that's where we're going to press the flight level change. That's now also switched on, and as you can see, what will now happen is that we will continue to climb until we reach that 5,000 feet, but we'll make sure that we're, I would say, continue to fly with this speed, right? So it could be that it decreases the pitch, but that's good, right? So also you can see that the flight level change is now active, and the Alt S, which stands for Alt Select, is, I would say, deactivated. But first, let's get rid of the autopilot or of the ATC, right? So increase, we want to go to, what is it? They assigned 2000 to us, I think. Oh, it's at 5,000, right? So that's good, right? So let's keep it like that. So you can see that we're coming closer and closer, and it already is set it now to Alt S cap, right? Which is the cap, which is the maximum altitude we want to fly. But as you can see, in the meantime, we deviated from course massively, right? So we need to do something about that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the heading mode, and the heading mode can be accessed by using the small knob over here, which you can see, which is really cool. And if we turn that around, and let me show it very quickly, it will do some things. First of all, you might think, hey, nothing is happening, but believe me, something is happening. But you might need to turn around the knob. Oh, shit, this is the incorrect one. For those who paid attention, don't do this, because I would say I screwed it up, right, by changing the altitude. So watch out for that one. Let me set it correctly again. To make sure that it's set to the 5,000 feet, right? Because that was the altitude which we were assigned to. Oh, it goes a little bit fast, a little bit slower. 5,000 feet. That's good. I was referring to this button, of course. As you can see, what now happens is that, I would say maybe it's better here. You can see that the blue line starts to change, right? So if we continue to do that, let me do that. You will see that it changes continuously, right? So and this is how I would say allows us to change the direction in which we're going to fly. So what we want to do is we want to fly into the direction at least into this area, right? So as soon as we set it like this, we can activate the heading mode, which is over here. A little bit hard to see, but the heading mode. And what will then happen is that the aircraft will start turning, as you can see. So this is something which you can do, and I would say then it's, I would say, hands off the steering wheel or of the yoke, and it will try to do its best to make the turn to the correct direction. However, in this case, we likely need to turn a little bit further, because one thing we want to do is make sure that we can use that other option, which we see over here, which is called the nav mode, and that's a navigation mode. So what we're going to do in our case is we're going to make sure that we're flying into that specific direction. And to do that, you can have a look at the arrow here, right? So this one needs to be in the center, and then you're really close to the, I would say, route, right? So currently we're too far to the right side from it. right side. So we need to turn more to the left. So let's do that. Another thing which you can, of course, do is I would say change the zooming level of the map. That's over here, right? So here you can change the zooming level and then it will show you, okay, hey, where you are. And you can see that we really need to make, let's say, a large turn, right? So let's do that. So we're going to change the heading mode in this case. Change the heading mode, and then we will simply point it into this direction, right? You can see that the aircraft directly starts to react, right? We're making, I would say, pretty sharp turns, but hey, that's fun. So let's do that. So the other thing which you not have seen likely is this one. That's the speed mode. The speed mode was something which was not available in the Cessna 172. However, it was possible in the Airbus A380. In this case, let's do that. So let's get rid of that auto or of that ATC, right? So let's increase with 3000. Let's request it because it continues to ask that we need to be at the correct altitude. And I thought that they initially assigned us 5000, but likely they decided to do something different. So let's do that. And if you've got any questions, right, please feel free to drop your question in the chat because I'm monitoring the chat. And I would say really looking forward to ask questions or to see people asking questions and also to react to those questions and also to look into those. No, we need to go to 5000. This sometimes is really weird, right? I'm pretty sure that I would say in Flight Simulator 2020, when you request to increase with 1000 feet, it would increase with 1000 feet. But here it says, okay, hey, if you increase by 5000, it will ask for 5000 feet and it will not, I would say, request the current altitude plus 5000 feet or the current assigned altitude plus 5000 feet, right? So we currently ask it. So here it goes, right? So here now it says, okay, 8000. It's really weird, right? So those buttons, as you can see, are not working 100% perfectly. So we need to decrease 3000 because as we need to climb to 8000 and that's not what we want. Now it's 5000, so now we should be good to go. So you can see that there's still some bugs in Flight Simulator 2024, but we all know, right? And those guys from, let's say, us and girls from Asobo and Microsoft are working hard to finish or to fix those things. So while we were discussing the speed mode, right? Let's do that. So the speed mode, in this case, if we move the speed needle, you will see things happening likely. So what can be done is you can press the left mouse button and then say, okay, hey, I want to adjust the speed, right? You can do that by, let's say, either moving left or right. As you can see, it's now increasing, but you can also, of course, use that scroll wheel, which is over here. And the scroll wheel will also, let's say, push the push the speed up. However, some things which I also found really weird is that it doesn't show it here, which I would have expected. Because initially you might think, okay, hey, but I want to keep that specific speed, so why isn't there a marker here? That's something which I didn't figure out yet, but maybe someone watching this stream knows it and can help us with answering that question. But for some reason, for me, it didn't, let's say, pick up. So if you activated it, you can also say, hey, I want to adjust the selected speed and then press the button, right? So that's over here. Now it's set to that 185. I found it a little bit limited compared to the A320, for example, where you really can see that the aircraft starts to descend or increase speed, decrease speed and increase speed. But in this case, I would say it doesn't work that fine. So as you can see, I would say we're coming closer and closer to the line. But of course, what you need to do is make sure that you're, I'd say, on this line before you want to enter that approach. And that's something which we're also going to look at. We're going to look at the approach mode, but also going to look at some other modes, right? So for example, the VNAV and the VS mode. So the VS mode is the vertical speed mode. So the vertical speed allows you to descend or increase speed, right? So if I would set it using this, if I would activate it first and then would, I'd say, decrease, you can see that it blinked shortly with 200, which means that you're going to descend with 200 feet. per minute. However, you need to keep in mind that you in that case also need to adjust the altitude, because it still keeps an eye on the altitude. Right, so I first need to adjust the altitude. Let me do that, for example, to 4900, and then press the VS speed, and you can now see that the aircraft starts to descend really slowly to that 4900. Then we'll again go into that alt select mode, which stabilizes the aircraft at that certain altitude, right? That's something which you can of course do. In this case, let's adjust it back to 5000 again. What you will see in that scenario is that the VS mode will continue to descend, right? So you also need to adjust it using this large, we'll say wheel over here, that you want to increase the altitude or increase your vertical speed, and then it will start climbing again with 100 feet per minute. There's one super important thing, and sorry for mentioning it so many times, is that you need to keep an eye on your speed if you're doing this. And the reason for this is that the VS mode doesn't look at the let's say at the speed at all, right? So that's something which you need to keep in mind. So what are the other modes, right? So the other modes is that VS or VNAV mode. That stands for vertical navigation, and that allows you to also climb or descend altitude. However, there's a huge dependency on your flight plan. So in your flight plan, you need to configure those altitude restrictions. If you don't do that, it simply won't work, because it needs to have those things implemented. Reason for that is that it will look at a specific waypoint, and then based on that, it will decide if it needs to already start descending or I would say increasing the altitude. So that's something which you need to be aware of. And of course, you can always do it if you want. But in this scenario, I don't think that there's a lot of added value, because it's not listed here. So while we're flying over it, right, we can see some things changing over here, but we're still going into the correct direction, right, which is good. So what you could do now is activate the nav mode. So if I activate the nav mode, what will happen is that it will initially show LNV1. So if it shows LNV1, don't worry, because it could be that we're too far from that pink line. And if we're too far from the pink line, it will simply not pick it up. If it is white, and it is, I would say, applicable to every mode, then it will, I would say, be in standby, right? So it will be in standby mode until it meets the criteria, and you just saw it met the criteria, because now it's switching to LNV1, which will now follow our flight plan, which means that we don't need to make any adjustments anymore using that heading button. Of course, it's up to you which one you want to use. However, I found out that this one is the most easiest one for you to use in most cases, right? So that's cool. So with that said, right, so what are the other things which we can discuss while we're continuously flying? Because we're coming pretty close to the, I would say, to the approach, right? Which over here, I have number 11, which is really cool to see. And then we can start, I would say, looking at the other navigation modes. So looking at the chat, I don't see too much questions yet. So again, feel free to pose your question here. So the next aircraft we're going to look at, if this landing will be successful, and fingers crossed that it will be the case, will be the Boeing 737. That's based on a previous request which was posted in the chat last time. So keep in mind that we're going to go to that one also really soon. So while we're looking around, right, here's the co-pilot, say hi to him. So it's also pretty nice. And then we can say wait, right, because we're gonna go faster and faster. Now, if you want to increase speed, you can always press the Alt and the R from Romeo, and then press the plus sign or the minus sign, right? That's really up to you. You can do it, but if you want to do it, then be cautious, because the aircraft will start to act sometimes really weird. So keep that in mind also. So we're waiting, right? We're waiting until we reach this nice point. So let me increase the range again, because then we can hopefully see it a little bit closer. Here we can see AHV 13, then IFF number 11. And we can see that the aircraft suddenly, would say, it starts to follow its nice direction, which is really cool. So pretty cool. Then there's another thing which we didn't discuss yet, and that's the for the navigation mode. There are multiple options, right? You can either use the GPS mode if the aircraft has GPS, or you can use the VLOG mode. One thing is that if you switch between the modes, then make sure that you enable the nav mode again, because what you will see is that the nav mode will switch off if you make changes to that one, right? So if I would press this one, right, you can directly see it starts going back to the roll mode, right? In this case, you can set it to FMS 1 or can set it to localizer 1, but keep that in mind that it will directly affect the navigation mode. So don't forget to reactivate it, because else I would say you're not screwed, but hey, it becomes a little bit more difficult to follow the route. So you can see currently this one is active. This one is the one which is, I would say, passive, I would almost say, but you can quickly change it by pressing the soft L2 key, which allows you to change the view. So we're going good, right? Everything is, I would say, still pretty nice. And soonish we're hitting that EHV number 13. And then you should have a close look at this one, because then you can see what happens, right? Remember that we talked about, okay, hey, if you activate the nav mode, it will directly start navigating, right? So here it starts blinking, which means that we're really close. As soon as it starts blinking, you will see that it will pick up the next one, which is IF number 11. So you saw the turn, and you can also see that the aircraft now starts turning. So relatively easy, right? Because you don't need to make any changes. You simply turn the aircraft, and the aircraft will turn into the correct direction. And then it simply will follow this route until it hits the next waypoint, which in this case is pretty close. And that will start to make another turn. And that makes it your life, I would say, easier. Of course, it's up to you if you want to use this mode. Because if you don't want to use this mode, you're free to do so. But I always like to use these modes because they are making your life easier, especially in longer flights. I would say I wouldn't use it for very short flights like this one, but hey, in this case we can use it. Now there's one important thing, of course, and that's if we want to use the approach mode, there is something which is super important, and that has to do with the altitude. So if I open the EFB, right, let me pause the air. Oh, we're far enough, so that will work. So if we would go to the checklist, this is the navigation log. You always have the clip charts, and inside the clip charts, you've got the airport. And if you're lucky, you also have those procedures also added to your maps. If that's not the case, then don't worry, because you can still do that. Let me zoom in. And this is what shows you the ILS category, but also it shows you, okay, hey, what are the altitude restrictions where you need to be? And that's super important, because if you're flying too high, it won't pick up the glide slope. And that will, say, likely screw up your landing completely. So be aware of that. So in some scenarios, there's, I would say, a better map available. So if you want to show that, you can either use, let me pause the aircraft in this case. I'm going to pause it. And then I'm going to go to, in this case, Edge, and then go to planner.flightsimulator.com, and I will show you what I mean. Because this one shows you the real interesting information. So if I now go to that same airport, where you can see, here it is. We're going to zoom in. Echo Hotel. Yes, I know you can also search, so don't worry about that. But I'm trying to find it manually. But likely I want to do it differently. So we departed from here, from Rotterdam The Hague Airport. And now we're on our way to this one, right, which is Eindhoven Airport. And as you can see, this is the airport itself. And if we click on it, we can also go to the procedures, but also go to the charts. So in this case, we want to fly ILS 21, right? So you can select approaches, then select 21, and then select this one, because this is the one we took. And then add it to your knee board, which is this one. And then it should be available normally in this flight, but in this case it didn't do it. always bad. But example, approach is 21, this one. So here we are, and then we can look at the, if we're lucky, we can also look at the map, right? We can do that in the charts. So let's do that also. We're gonna go to ILS 21, which is this one. And this should show us normally the altitude restriction, right? So here you can see the information. So Echo Hotel 568, you need to be at 2000 feet. So likely what you want to do is already start descending the aircraft, because else you would say you won't reach that altitude, and then you will be, I would say, in bigger problems, right? So let's go back to the aircraft. In this case, unpause the aircraft. And that's the P, right? So the P from Papa, you can, let's say, decrease the, no, not decrease. You can pause the aircraft and then continue, right? So let me, let's say, go to the ATC, right? So let's do that. And then say, oh, we need to decrease the altitude, of course, to that 2000 feet. But of course, you can't do it without, I would say, asking for permissions, right? So let's, I would say, initially we can change it. As you can see, nothing going wrong. And then hopefully we can say altitude decrease with 3000 feet, which makes sense, right? Because we want to descend with 3000 feet. Let's see if it's denied. So we're not allowed to say descend, but hey, my friends, I really want to do. So I'm gonna say not follow the guidelines, right? So I'm gonna really, would say, be nasty and can simply decline the ATC. Normally, never, but also never do this. Follow the guidelines, because I would say it does make sense that it denies it. But hey, in this case, make sure that you're following the ATC instructions. However, what I saw is that in some scenarios, you will be assigned to descend the altitude far too late. And as you can already guess, what then will happen is that you really can't, I would say, can't be at that 2000 feet in this our case. So I'm also going to, I would say, decrease the speed of the aircraft. And the reason for that is that I want to descend a little bit faster, because you can see that we're currently, I would say, not going fast enough downwards. But in that case, make sure that you descend or decreasing the speed, because if you don't do that, then, well, the aircraft will simply not meet that 2000 feet target. As you can also see, what it will be really a challenge in this case is that the corner which we need to turn is, I would say, really steep, which also, I would say, doesn't make any sense. So that's why you normally would use, I would say, an approach or standard terminal approach route, right? A star, where you can simply say, okay, hey, I want to, would say, have a better approach so we can do things a little bit nicer. In this case, it's we're at 11 Echo Hotel Victor again, and we're already switching in this case to Echo Hotel 061, which is in this case really challenging, because how can we make this landing successful? Likely we can't, because as you can see, probably somewhere soonish, you will see that we will see the airport already. But let's see if we can make it still successful, because we're 2.13 nautical miles, but likely we can't meet it. So let's, in this case, do something really weird. Never do this again, because it could result in breaking the aircraft. So here's the runway. At least I thought it was. No, we're not there yet. We're still turning. So the runway is somewhere there, right? That's likely another airport. Also, if the ATC simply ignores you, right, or tries to ignore you, then say be careful with that, right? So make sure that you're, say, meeting the target. Make sure that you're, say, in line with the ATC and that you're following their instructions. As you can see, currently also these lines coming closer and closer, which means that we can activate the approach mode. So the approach mode will do a few things. First, it will set the approach to localizer 1, which means that it now switched from FMS 1 to localizer 1. And then hopefully it will start doing its, I would say, tricks really nicely. However, in this case, what you see is that it isn't nice for us, right? Because you can see that things will go probably, let's say, really weird, as you can see. But let's see. Because I do think that we're coming to the airport, right? Which is good. You can see that the weather is not that good. Also, what you can see is that the glide slope, it simply doesn't pick it up. And this is likely due to the fact that we're, let's say, too far above the glide slope, right? So can you do something about it? Well, in this case, you can't do much about it, I would say, but the thing which you need to learn from it, like I also did, is that you need to make sure that you're on that specific altitude sooner than later, because if you don't do that, you will miss the glide slope, right? So I'm gonna do something which you should never do and try to reduce it. But as you can see, the runway is already here, right? So likely we can't do it. So let me, let's say, cancel the landing, right? So let me increase the altitude again to 2000 and press the Alt button. If I press the Alt button, by the way, it simply holds the altitude which we're currently flying, right? So it won't do anything else. So it will now stay there, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say that we're gonna declare a missed approach and then try again, right? So let me try that again. So we're gonna declare it as a missed approach. Now it says, okay, you missed the approach. And then we need to contact Eindhoven approach again. And then likely we need to, let's say, make some adjustments, and then we can, let's say, continue our flight. So the good thing about this is that we can now reset the altitude, or the heading, sorry. You can do that by pressing it and then right-clicking the button. And in this case, it will set us to that specific heading mode. Hopefully. Yeah, so it calls it roll mode, but that's the mode which we're asking, right? So then we're gonna say report missed approach. So we've done that. You can see that it's still set to localize number 1, so we likely need to change that and then see what the instructions are, right? So 6,600 feet. So let's change that, right? So let's follow the instructions again. So we're going to change it. I'm going to move it slowly, not too fast. Oh, 66. Here we are. And then we need to make sure that we're making some adjustments to the flight plan, which is in this case really challenging, right? Because you can see that everything is lost. So we likely need to do, say, something else. Oh, wrong buttons. So let's see how we can fix that. I do think that we can't fix it because we're simply, would say, are too screwed up in a too screwed up scenario already. This is good. Well, maybe I should call it a day in this case. Can I approach? Can I do it? Can I prove it? I'm going to say, okay, hey, let's do it. So what normally should happen? And again, this normally you will make the turn again, so you can switch to the heading mode if you want. But as you can see, I would say, although it's assigned here already, right? You can see the maps here, but this is the beacons which we already bypassed, right? So I would say we already bypassed everything. And in that case, since the flight plan is completely empty, I should say, you will see that it doesn't contain anything anymore, which means that the aircraft also can't be switched to heading mode again. So what you need to do in that scenario is you need to manually program your flight again with that specific altitude approach which have been assigned, and based on that you can, say, continue the stuff, right? But I don't want to, say, waste your time here with doing that. So few things which we learned right doing this one is make sure that you are assigning the correct altitude and you're on the correct altitude, because else things like this will happen. So I'm gonna press escape now because I want to continue with the 717. Yeah, I know, Jan, thanks for mentioning that. So thanks for the tip. So the second one, right? That's the Boeing 737. So sorry that I couldn't show you the approach mode, but I would say that went a little bit haystack, right? So again, super important. Make sure that you know which altitude you want to, let's say, approach, and then that you're on that altitude, let's say, on time, because else things will go wrong. So the second flight will be from Amsterdam airport to, in this case, Düsseldorf, right? So let's fly it with the ATC. In this case, we likely want to change the altitude to 10,000 feet. File with ATC, send to avionics. Keep in mind that in some scenarios, the aircraft won't pick up the avionics. So hopefully this one does it. It mainly has to do with, for example, the Airbus aircrafts from I&I buildings, which are also part of the default installation of Flight Simulator 2020. And in those scenarios, you will see that it will cause some issues, right? So it will, I would say, not load the flight correctly. If that happens also with you, I would say, don't worry, you're not the only one. So hopefully they will fix it soonish, but let's see. See more and more people joining, right? See a few people joining. Feel free to ask your questions or give your tips also, like Jan did in the chat, right? Really love it. So here we go. Let's see if everything is correct, right? So let's close this ATC window. Then hopefully, whoa, you can see that we're moving far too fast. Then let me hide the yoke, and then let's see if the legs are in. Yeah, that's the case, right? And here you can see some interesting things, right? Here you can see, for example, the flight levels, but also the speed restrictions which were in place. So what we're going to do is, in our case, we're going to make sure that we're assigning that altitude, which is set correctly, because this is the autopilot of the Boeing 737, right? You can see a lot of other options like the auto throttling. You can see the level change mode, but we're going to go into that while we're flying. So let's do that. So everything is correct, right? So let's do that. One other thing which you could do, because we already need to turn directly to the left, is do a little bit of, let's say, small workaround, and that's already to use the heading mode in this scenario. You can also turn it right, by the way, if you want, and then set it already to an altitude or to a heading, sorry, which is, I would say, pretty close to that pink line. Let's say you shouldn't activate it yet, but hey, this is something which you could do optionally, right? Also, let's say pre-configuring the speed, etc., is something which I definitely would recommend you to do. So let's remove the parking brakes and let's go in, increase them. So here we go. Of course, we didn't set up the performance modes, etc., right? But that's what we, I would say, what you should normally do. So here we go. Yeah, I know, we're climbing too slow. Yeah, some other aircrafts. So let's make sure that we're getting go correct, right? So we're getting go and already start turning a little bit to the left. Although likely we want to fly into this direction. And one thing we could do, of course, is activate the autopilot. In this case, the autopilot is mentioned over here, right? So let me do that. It's shown over here. It's this one, and then we can say heading select, And if we look pretty closely at this screen, we can see that the heading select is already activated. In addition to that, make sure that you're keeping an eye on the speed, because you can see that the aircraft already starts to bump around, which is not what we want. And that's where the speed mode comes into. So if you press speed, that will make sure that it will reduce speed. However, in our case, what we could also do is use that level change button. Before doing that, you need to activate the auto throttle. And you can see now it's armed, and then press that option level change mode. In this case, the N1 is activated, but also the MCP speed is set, which means that it can reduce the speed hopefully to 200 knots, but we'll make sure that we're also climbing. However, in our scenario, what we of course did is we set the IS speed, but we also pressed the level change button while we were, say, on a pretty high speed, right? So that's, say, something which we, let's say, need to keep in mind. While we're flying, we also need to keep an eye, of course, on the flight plan, because I would say we're deviating from the flight plan. So what you can do is you can use this nice wheel over here to, let's say, adjust the range. And you can see that we're already too far away. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that heading mode again, just like we did with the other aircraft, to make that turn, right? And you can see that the aircraft directly starts to turn, because we're still in that heading mode, which is good, because we need to go into this direction, right? And which is almost not viewable on the, I would say on this screen, right? So let me turn around further. Here we go. And then it will continue, let's say, in the direction. And as you can see, we're still climbing, right? So likely it will start leveling off pretty soonish, but it still is decreasing speed, right? So currently the N1 mode is active, the heading select mode is active, and the MCP speed mode is active. Why we can't switch to the LNAV mode? Well, because the LNAV mode simply doesn't work, right? The LNAV, we're too far away from it, although you can activate it. And you will see that it will, let's say, start turning into that white space, right? So in this case, the white space is there, which means the LNAV is in passive mode. And by the way, we also see that it now has, let's say, changed to the MCP speed mode, which is the one we configured over here. And the alt acquired mode is the mode which it levels off. In this case, 10,000 feet, that's the altitude which we're gonna level off, because that's the one we requested for in our flight plan. So in our case, let's wait till the aircraft to turn a little bit further right. You can see that we need to make a small adjustment. So let's do that. Let me zoom out a bit and show you. So we're gonna say go to this one. And then it will continue turning, and hopefully we can fly to this nice waypoint, and then it will activate that LNAV mode, which is over here, right? Because it's currently is, I would say, blanked out. So what are other things which you can do? Well, you can also see that there's, let's say, a larger ring on the outside where you can change the heading per 30 degrees. So by default, it's 1 degree. If you would, say, move this one over, then you can move to 30 degrees. This is likely, let's say, steps off 1 degrees. So this makes it, let's say, oh, sorry, this is the banking angle. Ignore what I said. I thought that this was for the heading, but this is the banking angle. That means that we, say, can adjust the banking of the aircraft. So if you would set it to this, you will see that the aircraft will start to make a sharper turn, and you can already see it. And 30 is, I think, the maximum. Of course, this isn't very, let's say, pleasant for your passengers. So also keep that in mind, right? So by default, it's set to 10. But you can also set it to 15, 20, 25, and 30 degrees banking angle. Right, and if you see, if we move it over, you'll see it will go much steeper if really needed. But in this case, we're going good and nothing is needed. So the autopilot has been switched on. It's set to the speedometer, which is this one, which we can adjust using this button over here. You can see that the LNAV mode is active. Level change, we don't need it because we're on the correct altitude already. But what are the other options which you can use? For example, the VS mode. The VS mode, similar to the previous aircraft, you can use it to either climb or descend with a certain rate, right? So in this case, if I want to descend with 200 feet per minute or 300 feet per minute, I can activate that VS mode and then use this wheel on the side to either decrease or increase my vertical speed. Then the other options which you will see is the altitude hold button. The altitude hold button is simply if you press it and if you're on, for example, 15,000 feet, it will level off at 15,000 feet. Then the other options are over here, right? So these are all have to do with the approaches. This is the for localizer mode and this is the approach mode. So we will use them if we're coming close enough to the airport, which is Düsseldorf. And hopefully we're on the correct altitude this time, because of course I want to make sure that we can land successfully this time. Then what's another mode which is pretty interesting for climbing and descending is the VNAV mode, the vertical navigation mode. And the vertical navigation mode allows you also to climb or descend, but it makes you some recommendations on which altitude you need to be at a specific waypoint. And that all has to do with, in this case, the flight plan, right? So while I'm making sure that we're going correctly to this beacon. Let me make some small adjustments. Oh, too far. But I think we will go pretty well. So the VNAV mode is, I would say, and that's where these altitude restrictions are, I would say, really useful for, because this will really tell you, hey, if you are on this specific waypoint, these are the altitude restrictions. And this will make sure that you follow the guidelines also, which are applicable. I use this one, I would say, in a majority for descending the aircraft, right? So I'd say when I'm reaching the approach, but you can also use it for climbing the aircraft if you want. As you can see, we're, I'd say, currently, or I'd say pretty close to that AM 20075. So I hope that it will switch soonest to that LNAV mode, right? Which isn't the case yet. There's some traffic. Oh, some eyes on the windows, it looks like. There's the other one. So we can almost wave to the pilots, right? So we'll be careful with that. So we're going good. So what I will do to speed up the process, I will hit Alt and R and hit the plus sign a few times. That will increase the speed and that's where I was a little bit afraid of. You can see that it now switched to that LNAV mode, right? So now it will follow the flight plan which we configured, and we'll now go to IFLUT and then we'll continue doing its stuff nicely. So it will follow the complete route which we pre-configured in the flight plan, as you can see over here. So we're going to IFLUT, Niker, Arnhem, and then it will go to that next page, right? And next page contains Halme, and here you can see the altitude restrictions, which are nicely shown here, which is 4,000 here, then 5,677, then 4,000 again, which will make sure that you are, if you're on this altitude, we can do the successful landing, right? So this is really cool. So let's see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to speed up the simulator, right? Because I want to make sure that we're, I'd say, on that correct altitude, but also want to ensure that we're, I'd say, at 4,000 feet at that at this mode, right? So, but first let me check what the ATC, is it us or is it a different one? No, it's a different one, so we don't need to pay attention to it. So that's good. So let's increase the speed again. And while I'm talking, I see more and more people joining. So thanks for watching this stream. So we're currently flying with the Boeing 737. We're currently using the Autopilot and only the speed mode and the LNAV mode, as well as the altitude hold mode. And I hope that, I would say, more people will join in and start interacting like John just did, right? So thanks for interacting. And this is what I meant, right? With that speed mode or with that speed sim rate increase mode, you will see that things will go really, I would say, weird. So be careful with this, because if this happens, you might end up, I would say, in a very bad situation. So if you want to decrease the speed mode or sim rate increase or multiplexer, then hit Alt and R again, and then press the minus sign. You can see that now, let's say, it kind of stabilized. One thing which you need to keep in mind in this scenario is that after RNM, right, it won't be able to, say, continue the flight plan. And it has to do with this route discontinuity. What I understood, and this is purely how I understood it, is that you normally won't fly that approach using the autopilot. However, you can still do it. You can need to override it. But I would say they are recommending to do it manually. So to override it, what you need to do is you need to delete that waypoint. But we're going to do it as soon as we're coming to RNM, right? Because it's not that far anymore, I do think. Let me check. It was 8.8. So what you can do, let's do it right now. So hit the del button and then hit that, I would say, those blocks. As you can see, those are now gone. And if you press execute, you will now see that the flight plan continues to follow. Again, normally, I believe that you shouldn't do it based on what I read on the internet. But if you have a different opinion or if you know more information, then feel free to let me know. In this case, you could also see that we already should be at 25,000 feet, right? So we kind of ignored the ATC, but normally you would be at that speed, and then you can see that you can quickly, I would say, or can nicely glide down to that specific waypoint. However, what you see here is between, I would say, these two waypoints, there's not too much, I would say, space, and you really can't climb from this altitude to this one, right? So keep that in mind, that you sometimes need to request for adjustments, because if you don't do that, you will be in nasty situations, like I was in a previous flight. And that's, of course, not where you want to be, right? So we're at Holme. So let's see if we can already descend to that 4,000 feet, right? So let's see if we can already request that. So we're going to open the ATC and then going to decrease the altitude, in this case with 6,000. I doubt if they would approve it, but hey, let's try to do it. Decrease the altitude. And then we need to decrease it with, we're now at 10, so we need to decrease it by 6,000 feet. Likely they won't allow it, but hey, let's see. So before reaching that one, right, we of course can use that VNAV mode, and that VNAV mode is something which you can use, but it really depends on if you want to do it. Right here it says depend, request 5,000. So it's okay. Well, let's do it in that case. So we're going to decrease this one to 5,000 feet. Might be a little bit hard to see due to the sun glowing on the screen. Here we go, 5,000. And then we're going to use that vertical speed mode. So you can see that you can either climb or descend. So in this case, we're going to descend with 600 feet per minute. But you can also, of course, do more, right? If you want to do 800, that's also fine. If you want to do more, also fine. The most important thing is that you keep an eye on the speed. Although it keeps already a track of the speed if you do this by default. So right, so that's good. Here it also says, okay, hey, I want to say this is the approach which is assigned to us, right? And then you see weird things happening. And this is something I need to warn you about, is that I've seen this already reporting people a lot, that I would say this really, I would say, is going weird, and that it starts to act super weird, the ATC. This is a bug which currently is applicable in Flight Simulator 2024, that the ATC will go completely weird. And it will simply assign you 10,000 things and 10,000 different things, which is of course not what you want to do. But hey, this is something which you need to keep in mind, right? So, and here you can see, right, it says now, okay, I'm going to do it. And then you will see soonish that will start asking things again. While we're descending, let's say change the rate a bit. Here you can see cleared, and then see things will go really weird. So hopefully you don't encounter this, but I do believe that everybody will encounter this issue, to be honest. So we're going downwards. So few things about that VNAV mode, right? So let me activate. By default, it will set to VNAV speed, but if you press it again, you can also switch to the MCP speed, and that will go into the R mode. Let me switch back to the, and this also also not sure why it's doing. It's now to set the level change, which is also good. So a few things about the VNAV mode, right? VNAV mode is really cool, but I could almost spend an entire video about that. Unfortunately, I would say it looks like that this doesn't pick it up yet, because what normally is really cool about that VNAV mode, at least I like about the VNAV mode, is that it will really guide you to the steps and will really make sure once you're pretty close to the airport, will be at that specific altitude, which is, I would say, super, super nice. In this case, what you will see is that it will likely not work. So few things about the VNAV mode. What's really important that you need to, let's say, make sure that the altitude which you assigned or configured here is matching the altitude which is in the flight plan, because else it won't work, right? So let me also decrease it to 4,000 feet while we're speaking, right? Because we want to be close there. And let's see, we're over here, right? So we're going to 14. You can see that we can, say, decrease the speed a bit. So that's also something which you need to keep in mind, that if you switch from VS mode to a level change mode, it could be that the aircraft starts, let's say, descending much faster because it wants to reach that specific altitude. In this case, the VS mode, right, the vertical speed mode is active, which we want to use to descend the aircraft. So let's see what happens now. Right, it will stabilize almost, which is good for us. But I think we're far too, let's say, a little bit too far from the waypoint. So let me increase the speed again. So let's go into speed mode, right, where you can see that levels off now. It moves to the MCP speed and the altitude hold mode, and then soonish we will likely start making the turn. So here you go. So we're now making the turn, right, to the next one, to the next waypoint. To XAMOD in this case, and XAMOD is part of the approach. Then we'll fly to DL 422, and you can see that there are more points over here, which are there, right, which is really cool, until we will hit CI 23 Lima, where we need to be at 3,000 feet. So again, keep in mind that you set that altitude correctly. So what you can do, if you want, of course, decide, if you scroll out a little bit, you can use this range button again, right, to see, okay, hey, where are we? Where do we need to be? And some things you also see that I would say it again starts acting up weird, likely due to the fact that there are some, I would say, some things over here which are not correct. But let's see, because vectors is the last one, right, which is over here. And then after that, you don't see any connection anymore to the airport, which means that the flight plan is in that case broken. Sometimes also doesn't help, but hey, that's how it is. And if I would zoom out here, because this is CI 23 Lima, as you can see, that's this one. So what we need to do is, as soon as we are at vectors, is make sure that we make a turn here again, so that we're flying directly to that one. So again, I'm going to increase the speed of the simulation rate, because looking at this, what you also can see, if you look how far we are from that pink line, right? You sometimes see that we really need to, let's say, that the autopilot requires some adjustments, hopefully in the near future, because initially this was also the case in Flight Simulator 2020 with some of the aircrafts, but they fixed it by simply starting to turn earlier. And what you will see now is that it will make those turns, but those turns are far too sharp and it simply can't make those turns, right? That's also something which you will see once we're, let's say, close to DL422. We need to go to DL426, and then it needs to make a sharp turn, and then things will really go weird. I'm seeing more and more people watching, so if there are any questions, feel free to drop them in that live chat, right? That's where the live chat is for. That's the only way we can communicate. If I would say if I do it like this, right? Another option would be to spin up a Discord channel. I've thought about it, but I would say haven't made a decision about it yet. But for now, let's see how this one goes. So we're turning the aircraft, as you can see. So while we're coming pretty close to the airport, right, let me also descend or decrease the speed a bit to 180. Here we go. And then when we're coming close to those vectors, we're gonna also say, make sure that we can connect to this one, right? Because this, I'll say, it looks like that the flight plan import is broken or something. Because normally it should import it, as if I'm correct, right? So let's go to the previous page. So this is the first page, right? It's where we need to be in. Oh. So at CI, we need to be at 3000, right? So that's good. So we're now cleared to Halma, right? Which is good. But we were already cleared, right? So I'm still confused about this. At least we're cleared to land. So what we're gonna do now is something weird. And I know it's likely not the way you should do it, but hey, we need to fix it, because if we don't take any actions, what will happen is that the aircraft will continue flying in this direction. And that's of course not what we want, because we want to go to the airport, right? So we're gonna zoom out a bit, and then we're gonna make a steep turn into the heading of the airport. So we're gonna make a turn. I'm going to use this, I would say, button, right? And we're going to switch to heading select mode. This will start turning the aircraft in the correct direction. And we, as you can see, we really need to, say, make a steep turn, because I would say we always need to fly in the opposite direction. In the meantime, we're also going to decrease the altitude to 3000 feet, because else we won't be able to pick up the glide slope, right? So that's also something which you need to keep in mind. So we're going to turn the heading a little bit further. So here we want to be, right? We want to fly to this one. And the aircraft turned pretty fast, as you could see, right? So really cool. 3000 feet, let's also activate the vertical speed and then switch to 500 feet per minute in this case. As you can see, we're currently, let's say, flying into the airport. Might be a little bit hard to see, so let me zoom in further. So at this waypoint, we need to be at 3000 feet altitude. So that's why we also are descending. Normally, you would do the descent a little bit more smoother. I'm 100% not a pilot, not even a sim pilot, I would say in some cases. And I really need to continue practicing this. And that's always bad if it goes like this using, let's say, a live stream, because normally it goes better. But hey, you will probably say, hey, that's always the case, right? So let's see. So in this case, we're going to go to CI23. That's the one we want to go to, right? That's this one. And hit execute. Oh. Sometimes other buttons are in this way, like this one. So gonna move, just move to a different mode and hit execute. So let's delete this one, execute, and then delete this one. And again, this is not what I normally would recommend you to do, right? Let me move to the other mode. Because normally, as far as I understood, you need to fly this part manually. So let me know if you're a real pilot and you're joining this channel. I'm probably laughing on a lot if that's the case. What I will do in this case, since we're coming pretty close to CI 23, I will activate the approach mode. So the approach mode, if it allows me to do, doesn't even allow me to do it, right? Which is really weird. It's not my day, my friends. Today nothing works. As you can see, the approach mode and the other modes are not working for some reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'd say, make sure that we're going to disengage the autopilot. Well, I said disengage. Here we go. And we're going to do it ourselves. But we're already too far, right? So you can see that I screwed it up again. I didn't follow the instructions, which I would say result in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to now do John's discussion or John's suggestion, right? So we're going to do it, I would say, we're going to do, missed approach, which is this case, right? Hopefully. You can see that the aircraft also goes pretty fast, so likely that's the cause, right? Because we're still in the sim rate, in that increased sim rate mode. So we're gonna fly, and what we're gonna do is, in this case, I see master caution over there, right? So we need to be at ILS. So let's do that, right? So we're gonna go to that. So let me open the window, but also make sure that we switch on the autopilot again, because else I'm a little bit afraid that we will crash. Need to switch like this. So what's next? So we're gonna configure the missed approach, right? So we are instructed to go to, what was it? Düsseldorf transition. So we're going to press this one, then go to transition and say, where do we need to be? Maybe it's on the next page. Dus, which is correct. And then we're going to, was it ILS 23? Yeah, 23 left, which is correct. And then hit execute. What you now will see is that it changed the flight plan, likely, right? This is the flight plan. So we're gonna delete this one again, because I want to make sure that we're on the correct path. And then we're gonna activate that nav mode again. Likely it won't be able to pick up the channel, right? Because let's say we're currently into the, let's say, weird things, where we completely screwed up everything. So let me increase the flight plan and show you why. Because we need to be somewhere around here, right? So this is Dus as far as I can see. So let me adjust the heading, and let's turn around. Oh, come on. So we're going to turn around the aircraft, because what we eventually want to do is we want to make sure that we're flying into the correct direction, of course, but also make sure that we're, say, into the or are able to use that specific mode which we want to use, of course. And that's why I also want to have a look at what HC instructors for, I would say, L2s, right? 11,000 feet. Well, it's pretty high. So I'm going to ignore it for now a bit. Here we go. So this direction, right? So this is the flight path which we want to take, right? MapMy, you see it over here. And you can also see the altitude restrictions over there, right? So let me switch it to 3000. And then use the vertical speed to, I would say, already decrease. But we first want to go to, in this case, a little bit further down the line to deuce number 12, which is, as you can see, it's over here, right? So deuce number 12 is over here. So that's where we need to fly to. So let me change the VS mode. So I've used Jan Stip to go around, right? In this case, which is, I would say, in some case, you really need to decide to do that because, hey, if you don't do it, you will be screwed, right? As you can already imagine. We already are because we didn't, I would say, use the maximum potential of the autopilot. Previous live stream went much better, I would say. This one wasn't that well, so excuse me for this. Likely also won't publish this one for future videos because I do think that this one needs to be redone, to be honest. So we're currently descending the aircraft, right? Because we want to be at the 3000 feet over here, which is 16 nautical miles, which we will continue to do. In the meantime, enjoying the scenery around us. Let me start descending a little bit faster because I don't think that we will meet it. Increase the speed a bit, not too much. You can already see that the flight path is shown here, right? So that is sometimes very useful to use. Let me show it quickly. So those blue markers are showing you the direction where you want to be in. So what you could decide to do is change the heading massively and then readjust it. Although I don't think that this is the, this is the decent path, right? So this path eventually. But we're coming close to that 3000, right? We're almost coming close to that other mode, to the Düsseldorf one. And then likely it will switch to the LNAV mode again. So we're going a little bit faster. Here we go, right? So now it did its thing, right? Now it picked up the LNAV mode, as you could see. So, right. So after this one, I do expect that the aircraft will start to make a nice turn instead of that buggy turn, which it initially did the first time. And that's why it's super critical, say, to look closely at your flight plan and to see, okay, hey, where do you need to make those manual adjustments? Because what I saw with Flight Simulator 2024, but also with 2020, is that it does not always take into account those, I would say, adjustments which it needs to make, right? So let's see how it works. Well, looking around, right, we're still going good. We're at a 3000 feet altitude. We're coming close to this 1-2. Then the aircraft will start to turn right, hopefully. And then after that, we can, I would say, switch on that approach mode, hopefully. So let's see, 3000 feet. Here we go. We're going to make that right turn into CI 23 Lima. And then we will continue, hopefully, to use the ILS functionality to land this airport. Right, so those blue markers are showing you, it's an indication on on which altitude you should be normally. That's, I would say, easy if you want it, but you can also switch it off in Flight Simulator 2024 if you want, if you don't want to see those items, right? But sometimes it can be very useful, especially for pilots just like me. So we're making the turn, we're going good, we're on the correct altitude. What can go wrong, you would say? Well, do believe me, a lot. So I'm going to decrease the flaps already a bit. Also decrease the speed. Should have done that earlier, likely. And then let's see if we can activate the approach mode. It looks like that the approach mode simply doesn't work in Flight Simulator, or I am completely crazy, but it looks like that these things are simply not working, right? So you would expect it to work, right? You can see the glide slope already here, right? So in that case, right, I'm done with it. So we're going to do it manually. And that's something which you can also do, of course. So what I'm going to do is, of course, make sure that the gear is down. So what we just saw is that the autopilot, in at least in Flight Simulator 2024 in the Boeing 737, doesn't work that good compared to the other aircrafts, unfortunately. But hey, hopefully they will fix it soonish. Or maybe I did simply something wrong. I would say I wouldn't scratch it out from the list. So gonna push the flaps to full. As you can see, I would say if you would look at this pink line, we're a little bit too low and too high, sorry. So we need to decrease. Need to push the stick a little bit harder, but also try, of course, to avoid that we're going too fast. Because as you can see, we're coming into the danger area. Whoa. Always a chance with those flaps, right? If you make a lot of change to the flaps, and if they're fully extended, it will push the aircraft sometimes really high. You see that the poppy lights are already burning. I think we're in a pretty good spot, but maybe not 100%. Not 100%, I do believe. So we need to decrease the speed a bit because we're going far too fast, if you ask me. In some cases, you can use a speed brake. It needs to be set to armed, right? But also you can use a speed brake to, say, reduce the speed of the aircraft, but I mean, this is not the best landing, right? If you're watching this one and look at it and think, hey, what is this guy doing? I know, this is not what you should do. But Let's keep our fingers crossed that we can land successfully on this airport. Come on. Wow, not bumpy landing, right? Not too good, I know. But at least we landed. It was unfortunately without the autopilot because for some reason the approach mode didn't work. I need to figure out why it didn't work. Maybe I did something wrong. But hey, that's it. I see that the number of users is dropping, right? So likely it's a good idea for me also to say it's an end of this live stream. I want all of you, or I want to thank all of you, right, for watching this one. It wasn't the best one compared to the autopilot functionality, right? Because a lot of the things were, I would say, were working, but not all of it was working. Some of the things were really broken. So sorry for that. Gonna, would say, go back to the books and go back to playing Flight Simulator to see, okay, hey, if I can understand why it did went this way, because I was perfectly, I would say, fine with that it would work normally. Well, in this case, it didn't work. So thanks for watching this stream. Hope you liked it and hope to see you back next live stream.